Okay. Just gonna double check. This is muted. Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us today for our panel discussion on positive urban development. We're joined today with three panelists who will be discussing one of the projects that they communally worked on together and alongside a large network of community members to create this project after a very long journey that they were just talking about. So the people with us today are Nancy Bastian, who's a partner at Cecil Baker Partners Architects, Heather Huot, the director of the Catholic Housing and Community Services, and Father Jeremy Hiers, the O.S.A. at St. Rita of Cascia Shrine. I hope I said all of that right.
That's great.
It's like my worst nightmare, I think, as like moderating a panel where I'm like, oh, am I going to say everyone wrong? And then I'm Samantha Connors. I'm one of the directors at Da Vinci Art Alliance in South Philly, where right now we are in our festival month for the Everyday Futures Fest, which is a festival talking about using art and science as a way to look at sustainability, specifically targeting community sustainability, urban sustainability, and environmental sustainability, and all the intersections in between, which we felt like this project was a great example. So I was thinking that we could start with just like whoever wanted to jump in about where this started from, and the project that we're talking about today with the Cascia. I'm not going to pronounce that right. Cascia Shrine? We were like in the office yesterday. We were like, is it the like super Italian way of saying it?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Even the Archbishop pronounced it in many different ways when he said it at the dedication, so don't feel bad. I don't mind kicking it off, and then Nancy, you can jump in, and Father Jeremy, you can give the Augustinian perspective. So as Samantha had alluded to, we were just discussing before we started how long this process took. We began working on this back in 2015. But it really, the roots of the project were before that time when the Augustinians had a vision for this site, and their vision was to create the Cascia Center, a place where they could invite pilgrims and provide outreach to the community. And Father Jeremy, I'll let you talk more about what the Cascia Center does, but that was the vision many years ago. But it's a really hard thing to accomplish. And they had incredible real estate on the corner of Broad and Ellsworth. And their first try didn't go so great, wasn't widely accepted by the community. And that's where we stepped in and said, I think we can help you. And I think maybe we can make this more than just the Cascia Center. So we started in 2015 to work very closely with the Augustinians on a design that would bring both their vision of the Cascia Center together with our mission, which is affordable senior housing. And Nancy joined us, right in the 2015, 2016 timeframe to start working on what that would really look like. So those are the roots. Nancy, I don't know if you want to give a little bit of thought about the way we started that back then, design-wise.
Sure. And it was interesting because, as you said, everybody knew this was starting to become a very valuable site on South Broad Street and had a lot of potential for development. But I think to the Cascia Center's credit, they decided to partner with the Archdiocese and preserve this site both for the Cascia Center, but then for the affordable senior housing, which I think is a really great in a sort of, we don't talk about it a lot, but could have gone different ways, but it stayed to become a place that really is serving the community all around, top to bottom. When we were brought on board, the site, if people are aware of the site and what it was before, just to the north of St. Rita of Cascia Church at Broad and Ellsworth, this is on the west side of Broad, south side of Ellsworth, was just a vacant lot. It was used for parking, but it had a chain link fence around it, as I remember, and it was not a particularly attractive frontage on Broad Street. And that was because the Cascia Center really did have this vision for that site, but just was trying to figure out how to accomplish that. But when we started looking at it, part of what goes into this, when we started looking at the design, was working with the Cascia Center and their needs, and working with the Archdiocese and what they were hoping to accomplish here as far as the number of units. And we were reminiscing that we went through several schemes, because these projects for the housing part of it get funded through the low-income housing tax credit program, which is done through PHFA, the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency in Harrisburg. It's a very, very competitive program with only a certain amount of funds available through it. And so you can only build a building of a certain size. But we worked back and forth. We started with a 62 unit building. That was 7 stories and had more space for the Cascia Center. And we actually met with the South Broad neighborhood. Sorry, I want to make sure I have that right.
Yes, it was the South Broad Street Neighborhood Association.
Right. We met with them the first time in the summer of 2016 with that 7-story building. And I have to say, we were going to the neighborhood association needing to get variances for a lot of things. This site was zoned for residential single family attached. It was zoned for 3-story row houses, which as you move west is what the neighborhood is filled with. But on Broad Street, a pretty good argument could be made is not particularly appropriate for that site. However, we needed to get a lot of variances in order to build, in the end, a 5-story building, which is what we ended up with. But we needed variances for use. We needed for both the housing as well as for the Cascia Center, and we needed variances for the height of the building. So we were going before the South Broad Street Neighborhood Association in July of 2016 with a 7-story building, which they embraced from the beginning. They embraced the notion of affordable senior housing at that site. They saw the need for it. They saw the great opportunity that this really was for the community. We then went back in December, I think it was December of 2016, where they scaled down building. They had some comments design-wise, and we worked through those. And a week or two later, we were back before them, but they were stellar. I mean, from the beginning, they were engaged in the process. They were supportive of the process. And just as a little aside, this is something that we do affordable housing work, and Heather knows this too, all over the city and in the surrounding counties. It's getting harder and harder sometimes to get that community support. There is just a real antagonism against affordable housing, and the NIMBYism is quite severe. And so it was just terrific in this case to have the community supporting us and not oppose the project, so that when we went before the zoning board at the end of 2016, we were successful in getting approved zoning for the site for this project. And that was really just the first step in a very long process of getting to a building. Heather, do you want to just talk about like the steps you went through to get the funding for the project?
So that is another long process. When you build affordable housing, you need funding from a lot of different sources. Nancy had mentioned the low-income housing tax credit program, which is our greatest source of funding. But it's not enough. We get approximately $12 million from the state for this for this project. But the cost was close to 18 million, or just over 18 million. So there was still some additional funds we needed. The city of Philadelphia is incredibly supportive of affordable housing. And so they gave us a significant award, not just for the housing, but they also gave us funds for the Cascia Center specifically. So incredible support from local government. And then we need to go out and find additional funds, and we talked to federal home loan banks, and we received 2 federal home loan bank awards. And I think as developers, we're so committed to our mission that we don't hesitate to put some of our own funds into these projects. And so for St. Rita's, we put some of our charitable dollars into the project to make it work. It's a complex process. It takes multiple rounds of applications. We actually got denied by the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency in our first go round and had to go back again. So you have to be patient. this isn't going to happen overnight. And we're really grateful that the community stood with us through all of that, because we had to keep calling, South Broad Street Neighborhood Association and say, oh, we didn't get that funding this year. Hold tight. We're hoping for next year. And the same with the Augustinians, our partners in this. We had to have that same conversation with them. We promise it's coming, but it's just going to take a little more time. So we're really grateful for everyone's patience through the process.
Does anyone want to go over what the Cascia Center does really quick for anyone who doesn't know at home? Because I think that was one of the reasons we were drawn to doing this panel discussion, because I think it's such powerful work and needed work. And I live in South Philly. I pass this church all the time, and I didn't know that that's what the Cascia Center was doing. So
yeah,
that's you, Father Jeremy.
Yeah, I'll take that. So for those that may not know, be familiar with the Augustinians, just a quick summary. So it's a religious order, much like if you've heard of the Jesuits or Franciscans and Dominicans, we're another religious order in the Roman Catholic Church. And our emphasis, our tradition is really on building and sustaining community. And one of the fundamental parts of our 1600-year tradition is that when one member of a community suffers, everybody suffers in some way. And so we have a responsibility to serve and protect community. So this is really at the heart of what we do. And actually, this is really, it took a long time to get a building, but it's a result of a long-standing tradition. The Augustinians built the shrine in South Philly back in 1907 when we were invited by then Archbishop Patrick Ryan to build a parish that ministered to the needs of the immigrant community. So not just their spiritual needs, but also their educational needs and social needs. And so this is another example of where we've been working for over 115 years with the Archdiocese to respond to the needs of the local community. Now it happens to be an aging population in need of low-income housing. So I just want to emphasize that's very important. But part of the reason why the Cascia Center was an idea long before we entered into this relationship was because one of the aspects of the shrine that's really evolved with our patron saint, Saint Rita, is this idea of peacemaking and reconciliation. Saint Rita was a woman who lived in a time not like our own, where there was civil unrest, where there was division, families were at war with one another, and there were civil disputes, and she was a powerful peacemaker in her community. And one of the ways that she did that was really following that Augustinian tradition of bring people together, help each other, hear their stories, develop empathy between the parties, and find a way to help, because we all hurt when we're not together. When one member suffers, everybody suffers. And so the shrine has been a place for these past 115 years where people come under the inspiration of Saint Rita to find healing, to find reconciliation. And the Cascia Center is to become really a place to further enhance that ability, provide more space for pilgrims that come from all over the world, as well as provide outreach in our own local neighborhood. And so, so there's now space for us to gather people around to talk about the issues of our day. Saint Rita is a saint who would certainly have something to contribute to the rising gun violence in our city. She would have something to say about the environment, because even though the environmental crisis wasn't an issue of her time, she certainly would say, if it disproportionately impacts a certain population of people, then it has to be looked at. And so all these opportunities now in this space are open, and for us to be able to host those discussions, host those dialogues. And we've actually already had some success stories, which is really good. So we're already putting it to work.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess I've been thinking a lot about what you mentioned, Nancy, about the community support of this project. Because I'm a fan of going to zoning meetings, and I love seeing what weird thing people are going to be like, no, we're going to talk about this for 2 hours now because I'm really mad that this one tree might be moved 2 feet. So it was really surprising to me to find out you did have such unilateral support of this project. or maybe not unilateral, but like you had a wide community support of the project. And is that because a lot of members of the community are already familiar with the work of St. Rita's, or is it just like the people who live nearby like recognize the need for affordable housing and wanted to support the project just for like the baseline of the project? And I'm also interested in like how that community input did change the shape of everything. Like, so not just like the 7-story versus 5-story, but like the other aspects of the project that were adjusted because of the conversations that happened in the zoning meeting. Because I feel like those spaces are really powerful.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Heather.
Well, I think, well, I do think the neighborhood is supportive of the shrine and their mission, and they've been a part of the neighborhood for, over a century. The shrine did come to them with their initial design, and the community was very honest with them at that point that it wasn't the right design for that site. So I think actually when we came to the table with the revised design that incorporated senior housing, I think that's what really resonated, that it was this merging of two missions that would really serve the community and make the best use of that site. I think the community was well attuned to the placement of that site on Broad Street and really wanted to make sure that what was being put there was going to be, the best for the community at large, and would advance the mission of the shrine, but also make great use of the site. Nancy, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that. You were in all those meetings with us.
Yes, and I think that's absolutely true. There was never a sense from the beginning of we don't want affordable housing here. That was really what was pretty extraordinary about this experience, because that's not what we hear in a lot of communities. It's rare, especially in communities that are thriving. Some communities have very little development going on, and you come there with a new building and they're just happy to have somebody caring and someone doing anything in their community. But here was a community that, is no shortage of new development going on and is thriving, but they were from the beginning. And I don't know exactly why, because we could have walked in there and there could have been people sitting there with their arms crossed saying, who are these people who are going to move in here? They're going to be the other. They're going to be, what are they going to do? Who are their grandchildren? Are they going to come? The things we hear at some of these community meetings are not pretty a lot of times. That just was not the tenor here ever at any of these meetings. They really did push us more on design, and they were really interested in design. And it's always a challenge. This is my architect's complaint, is that you're at zoning and you're still very early in the design and they're pushing you on design, which was terrific. And I was really happy. But I remember at the last meeting, I said, you're going to have to trust us on this. We are taking this design really seriously. There were some quibbles they had with Heather, if you remember, the amount of glass on the facade on Broad Street. And we were really trying to have the building really respond to the church to the south in a way, and not just be all windows. And that was a good conversation we had with them, a pretty high level conversation. So this was in many ways extraordinary. And I hate to say it, but I've had 2 situations for senior housing since then in other neighborhoods of Philadelphia where we have just been completely shot down just because of the fear of what this will mean for their communities. When our developer clients have been able to show them that their community is full of people who would be able to take advantage of this housing, who will maybe live in a 2 or 3 story house, who would be able to move into an apartment and be able to age in place. And they have just shot them down. And it's been not pretty. So that here was just, I don't know why, but it was never a question or never an issue. And so that was just terrific and very forward thinking. And just a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, I think the affordable housing aspect of it, which like it's so funny because it's surprising on my end to hear that you get so much like negative feedback about affordable housing, because like I feel like the neighborhoods that I'm usually paying attention to are like, no, please bring in affordable housing. We can't afford anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the idea of being able to age in place in and not worry, I think is so incredible. And then also having the Cascia Center there, and like, I'm curious, Jeremy, like, do you feel like because of the community input in this project from the beginning, are there more people utilizing the resources of the Cascia Center from the community than were coming into the church prior to that?
Yeah, I think, because now we have 46 new neighbors right next to the parish. And for those who are Catholic, it seems like they are really utilizing it. I do expect that as time goes on, as we're able to do more programming, especially around education and dialogue on some of the issues impacting our society, then we'll also begin to see non-Catholics utilizing it more and more. We had 2 events just in the past month, and we had a lot drop in from the neighborhood that go to other churches, aren't Catholic. So we're creating bridges around these issues that unite us all. So I think we're heading in that direction. It's a little early to tell exactly where it's going to go, but I'm optimistic from what we've seen so far.
Cool. And like, I wanted to talk more about the conflict resolution and meditation aspect that the Cascia Center does, and like how that's been going. Like, because I've been in a lot of spaces where there's not that, like, there's the idea of like accountability and like, let's talk it out and how do we come to terms with one another when we've harmed one another. But like, I haven't seen it in like a structured space like this before. And I think, number one, that's super cool. And I love the idea of a center having that as part of its core mission, but also like, how has it been going?
Yeah, so it's been part of our mission for a long time, and so one of the most recent positive successes we've had was, and we've made use of the Cascia Center for, was around the area of restorative justice. And really, we have a weekly Bible study that meets every Thursday night that brings together victims of crime, people who have committed a crime, people who work in the criminal justice system, people impacted from all different angles. And it's a wonderful fellowship where we all reflect on the same gospel together, just from our various viewpoints. And so that's one way they've been brought together. We've had a series of masses around the same topic. And we've also been talking a lot with some of the younger adults in the neighborhood, because the average age and within walking distance of the Cascia Center is 36. So what does the research say in terms of what 36-year-olds or 36-ish are talking about these days? And we're looking to use that to leverage some more opportunities to create additional dialogue along much of the same model that we've done with restorative justice. And then, people also, it's healing your relationship with God, with yourself, and with others. And so one of the other aspects of the shrine that we have is our reconciliation ministry, where people come for the sacrament of reconciliation, or confession for those more familiar with that term, as well as spiritual direction and counseling. And so those people come and they find great healing in terms of it. And we've had this long before the Cascia Center. The Cascia Center is only going to help us expand it. Where people come and they resolve their internal conflict with God and themselves, that then leads them to healing with other people. And so you see that. So overall, I think it's having an impact. I see people enter all the time with their shoulders down and, faces that reflect pain, and they leave with, standing up straight and, so forth. So I think we'll start to see it more on a community level as, we start to make use of this space and have more programming.
Cool. Yeah, I'm thinking about what you're saying. And then also Wanda had posted in the chat, which I think can combine these two things pretty well, of what Nancy and Heather were talking about with the housing as well. Wanda had said, some seniors realize senior living isn't all that good for their health. Personally, I like a mixed age group, like, for example, 40 years to whatever. You have affordable housing that has a level of wisdom and vitality. And I'm wondering, like, it's been like thinking of like the Cascia Center, like if there is like, I don't know the age of who's in the affordable housing, like maybe it is 40 and up, I don't know. But like, assuming it's not, Since the Cascia Center and St. Rita's and like just like Broad Street living in a city is nearby, like does that just basically create like mixed age group living, even if technically within the apartment is all like older people?
Right. Yeah, I think it's a good point, Sam. I think we actually in this particular site have a wonderful way of the seniors remaining engaged, but also have the benefit of a building that is specifically designed for the needs that they're going to have as they age. And I think that is one of the benefits of a senior specific building. You know, Nancy and her team really take great care to make sure that the apartments and the common spaces are designed in a way that are beautiful, but will also serve the residents as they age and their eyesight begins to fail, their mobility is compromised. You know, there's all kinds of things in this building that wouldn't be in a typical apartment building. So, but because of its location and because of the Cascia Center, there is already this ability for our seniors to engage with people of all different age groups. And so I think it's a wonderful, wonderful benefit.
Yeah, because Father Jeremy, like what you were saying about like the Bible studies and stuff, like I don't know, like I feel like if I was one of the older people living there, I'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna go hang out with these people and like talk about stuff with them, you know, like not necessarily like sorry, the chat is bumping right now. Yeah, like I feel like I would be engaging because like when you're already, if you're housed on top of a community space, I feel like it's kind of hard to just like walk by like this to like go to Sprouts, you know?
Yeah, very true. And we see some of that interaction already happening. I think it'll increase. You know, we recently had a session where people were invited to talk about their impression of the church, you know, as part of the Pope Francis's synod process. And that was some residents and as well as some younger people from the neighborhood. So it was just another way where just having a space just to meet and talk in a central location can be so powerful, especially when the community is bought into it.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna shift to the chat for a little bit just to people are excited. So John Prawn said, I'd like to hear more about why it is so hard to get community support for affordable senior housing. On one hand, clearly there are long-term elderly residents who are unable to afford to live in an area becoming gentrified. And I cannot imagine other locals, new or old, being against that. On the other hand, Father Hiers talked about openness to pilgrims from all over the world, meaning that it could change the neighborhood drastically. And that Ukrainians, Somalis, Islamic Tunisians, and so perhaps one could understand it changing in unanticipated ways.
So I think when you're bringing affordable housing, I think for a lot of people, it's not they don't necessarily know the faces that are going to be moving into that building. They don't know the stories, the folks. We do, because we do it all the time. And there's just anything that's new and different. There can be a fear about what that's going to mean for a neighborhood. And when you look at senior affordable housing, what we try to convey when we go to community meetings is that it really will be seniors from your neighborhood. You don't realize that your neighbor down the street is struggling. They're not telling you that. They're not going to tell you that financially they're having trouble making ends meet. And us having this there as a resource for them, they are going to be the ones moving into the building. So I think, you know, all of us have that fear of change and fear of the unknown. And so it just takes some time for us to talk through what we see in our buildings. And they are primarily people from the neighborhood that move into our buildings. I mean, no matter where we build, people want to stay where they know, where they love, where they've been for 40, 50, 60 years. So I think a lot of our work early on with the community is helping them to understand that. But it is challenging. And as Nancy said, sometimes it can lead to a project not being successful. You know, one example that we have is we did have a project where it was actually just one person in the neighborhood. The neighborhood was very supportive. We had one person who was opposed and during the zoning process, and we had to go to the state Supreme Court for zoning appeal. So those things do happen. And we were able to build the building, and it's a wonderful asset to the community. But I think it's our job as the developer to really listen to those concerns and help the community to understand what we do and who we will be serving, because it's a new concept for many.
Well, I wonder, like, I also just feel like, knowing what the mission of the church is, I feel like specifically targeting affordable housing for senior living makes a lot of sense, because it's like the community aspect of like caring for one another. So it's like, if I don't see my next door neighbor is like at my house, right, for a couple of days, I'm like, oh, they're probably on vacation because they're in their 30s. I wouldn't assume that they're dead, right? But if I like live, like we do live a couple of houses down from someone who's extremely old, and when I don't see them and I notice that their car is still there on Sundays when they usually go visit their family for Sunday dinner, I'm like, oh my God, has anyone checked on them? Have they seen them lately? So I feel like there is also that level of like community care that comes into spaces that like may not exist in other spaces of the city. Like I lived in East Passyunk for 10 years, and like I didn't know my neighbors in the same way that I do in the area of the city I live now. Sorry, getting a little personal.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely accurate. When we create these buildings, aren't just buildings, they are communities, and people really do look out for each other. And we have staff. We have a social worker on site. We have a property manager. They know who goes where, when, because they see them every day. And if they don't see, Mrs. Smith going out for her groceries on Wednesday morning, like she normally does, it's going to alert them that something may not be right, and someone's going to check and make sure she's okay. And for a lot of families, that's a really nice thing as well. For young adults who have parents who move into our buildings, knowing that there is this community around them and that their mom or dad aren't living alone in a 2 or 3 story home trying to manage is very comforting.
I would just also jump in and say, when you talk about the age groups and the program that Heather got financed through is for seniors. Heather, what is the minimum age for getting into this building?
62.
Yeah, so it's 62 and up. So through the tax credit program, when Heather applied, she had to apply either for senior housing, or I guess it's just called family housing, and that can be for people of all ages. And right. So, but they have, we as a country have made the decision to have this option of senior housing, because and Heather, so much more about it than I do, but put more resources behind that need, because that need is the need is great at all ages, but it's the seniors who are particularly vulnerable, and don't, these seniors who Heather is serving are not those who are going to move into an assisted living facility. I mean, they don't have those kind of resources to allow them to do that. And what I think is great about this is the next best thing, if not just as good as, because it is a real community. As she noted, we really do design the units for people to hopefully age in place, and we keep tweaking those units. And what we did with Heather in this project is they are all 1-bedroom units. That's pretty standard. And these are all ensuite bathrooms in the bedrooms. So that is something we worked with a gerontologist a few years back, and she has spent her career just studying how architecture can help seniors remain independent, and what things you can do architecturally to help ensure the success of someone to remain independent as long as possible. So we have designed into this project elements that otherwise can become the point where someone says to their family, I just can't do this anymore. I can't live on my own anymore. One of those triggers really is like just feeling comfortable that in the middle of the night you can get up and get to the bathroom. I mean, it's as simple as that. So with the ensuite bathroom, and we have the sliding barn doors that are extra wide so that you know, it's open. We have a little nightlight in the bathroom that you wake up in the middle of the night and you can see, okay, I'm okay, I can get there. It's not that I have to go out a door, down the hallway, and then through another door. It's simplifying some of those things so that the seniors, as they, you know, at 62, they're young and vibrant. They may be pretty young and vibrant even at 82, but we're really hoping as they become older and potentially more frail, this can be a place where they can stay and remain and feel safe and comfortable. This would be the biggest gift I think all of us want, is that we can remain in our home as long as possible as we age in place. So I do think there is a real need for senior housing as a specific type of housing, because it does, and a senior could decide not to move into this housing. They could move into more family type housing. I did see one of the comments was there are long waiting lists, and Heather could tell you all about long waiting lists. There are long waiting lists, and that is a huge issue.
Yeah, I would say for any of our buildings, you know, the wait is between 2 and 5 years, depending on the building and the waiting list. So it's you know, we get calls all the time with seniors who need housing tomorrow, and unfortunately, you know, you cannot access a senior affordable apartment that quickly. So we have to find all kinds of temporary places for people to go while they wait on these waiting lists. And just to reiterate, so as Nancy said, we apply for funding for a building specifically for 62 and older. I mean, there are developers who are developing that family housing for younger populations. Catholic Housing and Community Services, we specifically serve seniors in all of our services. So housing being one of them, but we also provide case management services in the community. We provide senior centers. So that's our focus. Our focus is seniors. So that's the kind of housing that we build. But there certainly are developers who do that and who make that their priority. So, but there is a great need for senior housing. I think there's a misconception that when people retire, they have the funds they need. But you know, what you have when you retire doesn't necessarily grow. You're not going to get more income. It's only going to lessen over time. And so there are, you know, some folks who retire at 60 and by the time they're 80, they're in a different place financially and they need something more affordable. So, you know, we really try to educate communities as much as we can about the needs of seniors. And we've had seniors who've moved into our buildings who are sleeping on air mattresses in, you know, one bedroom or they're renting rooms, you know, and in really horrible conditions that no one would really know about because they're so proud and they don't tell people their stories. So such a great need.
Nancy, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, thinking about all of this stuff, was like, I know that one of your passions within your design is like working on projects that are affordable housing or have a social impact. And I'm curious if like the process for the Cascia Center influenced like the other projects you're working on, or like how much you feel like you've like learned from this project that's informing your future work. Yeah,
sure. Well, this project is, I think now our office, well, I've been with Cecil Baker Partners for 35 years, which is a bit shocking to me, but the firm has been in around, we just celebrated our 40th anniversary. We have done over 1,000 units of affordable housing in and around Philadelphia. And I've been working on affordable housing for about 30 years. This project is going to be one of the highlights in my reel, in part because when Heather came to us, the directive here was, we're on South Broad Street. This has to be a beautiful building. This has to be one for the ages. These projects, as she mentioned, your funding is challenging and limited. And so we try to spread our dollars as far as possible. The other piece that's built into these projects is the state has really decided to make these buildings highly energy efficient. They are much more energy efficient than most any other housing being built. So they oftentimes far exceed the energy efficiency of other housing, market rate housing being built, probably far exceed that. So there are real challenges budget wise, but our goal here, and it was such a great site, was also to have a mixed use building is unusual. And I think is what we are going to start seeing more and more in projects, but this was really our first mixed use project with such a important second use besides the housing. I think that has really been an inspiration, and we're now working with a client in North Philadelphia who wants to combine senior housing with a grocery store, and looking to and a little food distribution center. So they distribute a lot of food to the neighborhood, so they want to have a food distribution center, they want to have a grocery store, and then the senior housing in an area that's very much a food desert. So we're starting to see that mixed use coming up more and more, which I think everyone will welcome and should welcome, because it's not just creating silos of housing, it's really integrating the housing with other uses. And I think St. Rita Place and Cascia Center was really our first project that did it so beautifully. But also I really do have to give Heather and her folks a lot of credit. She's very modest when she says that the Archdiocese helped put some of their own money in this. I don't know if people have seen the building, but it's an all brick facade. So we have brick, and then we have the Aristocrat stone on the part of the facade that faces the church. That did not come cheaply, and that is not what you typically can get with affordable housing. So that was an above and beyond. That was their total commitment to this site and doing a quality project at this site, and understanding the importance of being able to do that here. It didn't come easy for any of us, but it was just a real joy to be able to have that directive from a client who cared so much about the quality of the construction that was going to be built here. So that was pretty amazing. It is a wonderful, affordable housing, it's such a great need. And then at the other part of it also is the clients are so wonderful. So people like Heather and a lot of our other clients, they are very much mission driven. So Heather doesn't get up in the morning and say, I'm a real estate developer. She gets up in the morning and says, how can I help seniors in Philadelphia who need our help? One of the ways I can help them is give them a safe, affordable, beautiful place to live. So it's a mission on their part, Catholic Housing, to be able to provide that for low-income seniors. So we have other clients who they do drug rehabilitation. They do inpatient drug rehab, and they've realized that people come to their inpatient drug rehab program for 6 weeks, they get clean, they go home back to their community, and within a few months they're using again or they've relapsed. Well, they've realized that if they build affordable housing and can put the people who have gone through their 6-week inpatient program into that affordable housing with all kinds of supports when they come out, their chance of recovery just skyrockets. We're have under construction in West Philadelphia right now, our second project for this client, to do another 30 units. It's for women and children. It's incredibly successful, and this is our second project for them. So they don't get up in the morning and say, I want to build real estate, I want to build housing. They get up in the morning and say, we do drug rehabilitation, we do drug rehab, but how do we make it actually work? And one of the ways, housing always seems to circle back to be the answer to a lot of problems. So we do drug rehab, but we find people go back to their old neighborhoods and they relapse. Well, if we could build housing, that could be another way to keep people clean. And so it's really wonderful to me that housing, it really should be a right, and it really can solve so many problems. We have a large project for Project Home that's under construction right now in Kensington. Project Home has really focused a lot of their energy in Kensington lately. They just finished another project there, but this project we're doing is on the Temple Episcopal Hospital campus. We took the old school of nursing building, which had been sitting vacant, beautiful 5-story brick building. We're turning it into 54 efficiency units for people in recovery. There's also an 8-bed emergency unit on the first floor for people in active addiction. There are tons of services built into this building, so there will be all kinds of support for folks, but they have people on the street in Kensington every day. They will be able to bring them directly into this facility and then into this, and it is permanent housing, but with a ton of support. So I don't know how I got to that from your question, but I really do love that through the affordable housing paradigm, we can help these different mission-driven organizations solve a lot of problems that they spend their time addressing. And that's, to me, like the best thing. So clients will come to us from all different backgrounds, doing all different kinds of work. And then how can we help with the architecture solve, and then through affordable housing, usually solve some of the problems that they are trying to every day, day in and day out, work on improving. So that's where architecture just can feel like a real gift and a wonderful thing.
Thank you. I think you answered my question perfectly. I enjoyed it. John had a question about the project that you're working on in North Philly now, that has the grocery store underneath. Is there a guarantee for the use of the grocery store area? Like, is it a long-term lease, or like, can that expire and then it be used for something else? Like, I mean, his example was a beer distributor, but like,
right.
Are there any like protections in place, or is it kind of moot because of the way our zoning works?
Well, in that case, this is again another site that's zoned something completely wrong for what we want to do, which is, what you often come up against. This site is zoned industrial, and it's an industrial part of Philadelphia, but then there's row houses right across the street. So the industrial use will not allow any of the uses we're going to propose here. We will go through a zoning process and have to get approved for a grocery store use, which would be only, and then the multifamily, that's what would be approved at that site. If the lease ran out and a beer distributor wanted to come in, they would not have the zoning to do that. They would still have to go through that zoning process. So it's not as if someone would just move out and something new could move in. It would have to be approved by and in this case, because it would be a variance, you'd have to go back before the Zoning Board of Adjustment, plead your case and get approved. Heather, you might know better, because the low-income tax credit program is very particular about who you would include in your building. And I mean, years ago, these projects all used to be through HUD, and HUD was like at that time, they did not want any other uses. They just wanted housing and no other uses. And around 2000, I finished a building in West Philadelphia for Ralston House, which included a life center, an adult day health center at the ground floor. So it was a mixed use building, and HUD had really very rarely ever allowed that. But there were lots of overlays in that lease. And I'm sure with PHFA, it's similar, that they're very careful about how those leases get set up, I'm imagining.
Yeah, so I don't want to get into too much technical jargon, but when we get the tax credits, we actually end up with an investor, usually a bank, that becomes our partner financially in the project. And so everything we do, the leases that we make, all go through their scrutiny as well. And I'll say in the instance of our mixed use building, we had so many lawyers around the table representing the Augustinians, the Archdiocese, the investors, PHFA. Everyone had a way of contributing and making sure that the use of the building, and not that this is going to happen, but let's just say the Cascia Center decided in 10 years that it was no longer going to function. They put all kinds of safeguards in there so that the use of that space would still be congruent with the mission of the affordable housing and of the community. So it's all really looked at during the process of designing the leases and the agreements between all of the parties.
There's lots of safeguards built in to ensure that. Yeah.
That's good to know. Because you see so much development, especially in Kensington right now, of like the old industrial buildings that now are getting turned into luxury lofts that the neighborhood can't afford. I have feelings. So yeah, it's I think because the zoning is so complicated right? Where like how people get away with the things they're getting away with.
I know.
So intriguing and mysterious. That yeah, I didn't realize that there were so many, the ability to have placeholders or like I guess yeah, is that what I'm trying to say? The ability to safeguard, to make sure that like if the Cascia Center closed, it could still be a rec center or like, I don't know, like a library or something that could still benefit the community that is living there or around the area. And let's not say like, I'm sure that people who drink would love a beer distributor closer to their house too, but personally,
it would not be ideal for residents though to have one.
Yeah.
And so when we're designing affordable housing, again, there are so many, because of the stringent requirements with the funder and with the investor, everyone is looking at the senior housing or the affordable housing is the primary use. Everything else has to be supportive and congruent with that use. And it's all, laid out and safeguarded.
I want to go back to Eliza asked about like a half an hour ago. And I'm curious to what degree public engagement influences the final project. Will projects in a community with overwhelming resistance / NIMBYism still get built? Because I think that goes back to the conversation we're just having a little bit of like, because personally, I think these projects are incredible and where development should be headed towards, especially with a lot of the issues that we're facing in Philly right now, or in general, Philadelphia. I would like to hear more about that and like some of the resistance that you two have faced in other communities that maybe haven't been built because of that.
Well, our experience is it's hard to find sites in Philadelphia, especially, well, not especially in general, but it's maybe especially for affordable housing that are zoned for what you want to do on those sites. So it's rare that a client will come to us that, hey, we found this site and look, it'll exactly allow us to do what we want for multifamily. That's very, very rare. And so you usually are requiring some sort of zoning relief in the form of a variance. And so when we reach out to the community groups, the registered community organizations, we'll meet with them and start having conversations with them. And in the end, we really are relying on them not opposing the project. And if they are going to oppose the project, then we really would have to rely on the city council person to support the project. Mm-hmm. And in one case, we did have the city council support the project, but the neighborhood opposed it. But in the end, they kind of gave in, and it just did not happen. So the community groups are quite powerful and fairly so. I mean, they should be. It was just frustrating when in one case we had a vacant lot. We had plenty of space, we had plenty of parking. It was really a great project for the community, and there was just so much resistance, and it was just impossible, and the community did not support it, and it did not get a zoning variance. We were not successful. So and that's just hard. On the other hand, it's that community, that was the decision they made. They decided, and it wasn't just a zoning committee that decided, it was the whole community invited to these meetings. And as a community decided, no, I think they were wrong, but that's what they decided. And so, you have to live with that, because we were not going to get the zoning board of adjustment to say, well, we're going to ignore the community's lack of support. And they do that at times, but it felt like that would be very, very unlikely for affordable housing. So it's hard.
Do you feel like when you partner with places like St. Rita's and like the Cascia Center, is easier to get things passed because there's already like an institution that has made inroads in the community?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They have a lot of gravitas that they bring to the table, and everybody, I think everyone loved the Cascia Center. There, and everyone was happy the Archdiocese wanted to be there. So that absolutely helps. And they have stellar track record. So,
and I think generally speaking, I can't say all the time, but when we take, this isn't an instance where we're doing this, but we have often taken old school buildings that were closed and converted them. When you're doing that, oftentimes the community rallies around that because they have this vacant building that was a vital part of their community, and us coming in to turn it into affordable housing is generally seen as a positive thing. So that's generally speaking, not always. Sometimes there's still some pushback, but in instances like that, again, where it's you're dealing with a parish that's a part of the community and has been for a long time, it can be a little easier.
Right, you're not seen as an outsider coming in and overlaying something. You're already there. Yeah, certainly helps.
Well, Nancy, and what you said about like the project that didn't go through, that it your comment about the parking, that there was enough parking.
Yeah,
I feel like that is usually like the go-to argument too, is the parking, because like yeah, because we are like a row home city, you know, which like especially for like senior living doesn't really make sense. Like I'm a disabled person, and sometimes I'm like, how long can I live in my house? You know, like you have to like start thinking about the long term. And then it's like, well, where do you go? Because also like the high-rise buildings are either like gross or not affordable. So yeah, I don't know. Like I feel like that's like the number one argument I always hear in the community zoning meetings, of people being like, well, this is a row home area, we don't have high rises, and like where are people going to park? We already don't have parking. And like is the solution for that, should the city be investing in like parking garages? Or because like I feel like from biking Twitter, right, there's everyone just being like, no, we're just like cut the cars. And I just like, I agree with the sentiment. I don't drive, but I don't think that's a reality for a lot of people. And I think that is a little ableist for people who can't bike or walk. So yeah, I wonder if you have given thought to like long-term solutions for like neighborhoods that are resistant to high rises because of the parking issue, or if there's like a solution that you three have thought of that would be great.
I don't know, at St. Rita Place, the subway stop is right there. That helped.
Yeah, and you're right. Parking comes up every single project that we've worked on in the city. Parking comes up as a question. And what we've learned in all of our buildings that are senior buildings is that the vast majority of our residents do not drive. And we pick sites that are easily accessible to public transportation. But a lot of our seniors use CCT, the SEPTA paratransit rides. Uber has become like such a great thing for our seniors. So, we really, again, we try to educate the community a lot on what we already know about our seniors on city sites, but it is a challenge every single time. And I don't think we've come up with a great solution to that question, other than trying to help them understand that we're not going to cause a big parking crisis, we promise.
And what we'll do is, if we have the space, we'll show the parking as much as we can, even though we know the parking lot will mostly sit empty. It's just, if we need to do that in order to get their support, we'll do that, even though the parking lot will mostly sit empty. So again, I think the people who move into the senior housing, if they're 62 and active and running around every day, they're probably not moving in. They're, a lot of times it's when they're getting older and a bit more frail. I could be wrong about that, Heather, but it's not often, I'm going to get my car every day kind of people. That's just not who we're moving into these kind of projects.
Yeah, I mean, we do have some, but I would say that's not the norm. We do have some folks who are in their 60s, early 70s, who are still out working or volunteering and who are driving a bit, but that's not the norm.
Yeah.
They also do a lot of carpooling. If one senior has a car, they're all getting in it and going to the grocery store.
That's great. Yeah.
I think Wanda made a good point in the chat of the building could have a van, zip car, and what you mentioned, SEPTA, Uber, Lyft. And I wonder if that's also like a long-term solution, is like having Zipcar more accessible to a lot of these spaces, like a lot nearby. So it's like, okay, well, here is an alternative, not just for the people who live in like the high rise that's going up, or like multi-unit that's going up, but the other people nearby who would maybe want to access Zipcar.
Yeah, and some of our projects over the years have had the vans. That is something, just as Heather mentioned, every Wednesday they go to this grocery store, and every Thursday they go somewhere else, that becomes available for the residents.
I'm trying to make sure I didn't forget anything in the chat. Oh, well, John just said, I agree, Wanda, that people should be able to move within their stomping grounds, but can it be legally defined a catchment area to serve a particular project?
Oh.
Is that legal? Is it discriminatory? But if it were in place, would it help diffuse neighborhood resistance?
So it absolutely would diffuse neighborhood resistance. However, it is not legal. We have to abide by fair housing law, which is federal law, which means that all of our buildings need to be open to anyone who wishes to apply, no matter where they live. And I will say, we had in one of our buildings, not St. Rita's, we had someone apply from California for our building. Now, to be fair, she was moving back to the neighborhood that she had grown up in. So it was a wonderful story, actually, when she arrived at her new apartment. But we do have to follow those laws, and it is open to everyone. But what we do try to do as what Catholic Housing and Community Services, what we try to do when we're opening a new building is engage with the community and make sure they understand how to apply, where to apply, what time to be there, how to get the application, what they're going to need, so that, when application day comes, they're well informed. They're the first ones there. They're just very likely to get an apartment.
So it's like a day at 9 a.m. you show up, and that's when the application's open, right? And you have to advertise that in a certain number of places. Is that right?
We do. We're required to advertise. I mean, obviously in the local community, but we also have to advertise to, this is all, again, fair housing and requirements by our funders. We also have to advertise throughout the city in different publications, try to draw in different groups of people. So we do that, we follow that. But again, I said this before, I would say over 80% of all of our residents are from the zip code that we build in, who are moving just within that zip code.
You had people calling you in 2016 about moving into this building. I remember that.
I made some friends over the years. They would call me every few months to check in to see if St. Rita's was built yet. And this was from like 2016 through 2021. So I got to know some of them pretty well.
I hope some of them moved in.
They did. Yeah, some of them did.
That's awesome.
Father Jeremy, I wanted to go back to you. I'm curious, now that you're open and you're engaging with the public and like the people who live there, like what's some of the feedback you've gotten, and has that like community engagement continued to happen where they're asking for like different programs than they were before? And like, are your programs expanding and like changing as time has gone by? Or like, are you looking forward to something on the horizon for what's coming at the Cascia Center?
Yeah. So we, first of all, the immediate feedback from everybody that's been in there is they really love the architecture, the design, the way that you kind of flow in, and, it's an open space. So lots of people are interested in seeing what kind of events come out of it, just because of the facility, the space itself is nice and conducive to collaboration. One of the things that we've been focusing on since, because we really have only been in there holding meetings really for a couple of months, is really a lot of discussion in terms of, okay, here's the people that walk by every day. What are they looking for? What are they seeing? Holding focus groups to really kind of drive what that programming would look like. What are the needs? What are the people talking about in the local bars and restaurants that might be good to bring into the Cascia Center to talk about, and who are some of the target audiences we want to do. So, there's a couple of key areas that the Cascia Center can really facilitate. One is obviously community dialogue, and the second is education, and really, building opportunities to become educated on some of the issues that are impacting our city and our world, and then flowing from that, the dialogue. So nothing too concrete other than the restorative justice focus that has kind of gotten us started at this point, but a lot is coming, a lot's in the works. The focus groups have been very, very productive for us in terms of figuring out, what might be the need.
It's
I'm
awesome.
just curious too about can you just talk a bit about the pilgrims who do come? Because I was just amazed at the pilgrims who come.
Yeah. So, there's St. Rita devotees all over the world. And, for various reasons, some look to her for, she's the patron saint of peacemaking and impossible cases. So she tends to attract people around two of those areas, people. And so we have church groups, we have schools that come here for programming. They come here for retreats. They come here for education. They come here for just prayer, stop by. Summertime, a lot of people will just stop by because they're touring Philly and they saw us on TripAdvisor. And so it's all ranges of purposes. And before, we were somewhat limited on space. It was primarily the upper shrine, the worship space, and then the lower shrine, which is a place of prayer and refuge for St. Rita. And now we have space to hold meetings with them, to give them some more options for activities and so forth. So a whole range of purposes. But certainly, we have people from all over, that come for various reasons, and of all age ranges, from elementary schools to senior groups. So,
yeah, and the shrine is really, really beautiful. If anybody who hasn't visited, it is just amazing. It's quite an experience.
Yeah, I have people all the time stop in and just want to look at the artwork.
Just stunning.
I have to say, as a mom of elementary school students, I did go on a field trip to the shrine a number of years ago, and it really was kind of a get off the bus, let's look at the shrine and get back on, because there wasn't a space to then gather the children together and learn about St. Rita there. So I think, I look forward to maybe another school trip where we have a little bit more opportunity to learn more about St. Rita's.
Yeah.
Oh, John says that he can Google the Cascia Center drawings, but is there any chance that we could screen share some of the images to the audience? Like, I didn't prep that. Now I'm like, oh, I wish we had prepped that.
I have some images of the finished building. I don't know if people want to see that.
Sure. I just made it so you can share.
Oh, well, let me see if I can be, now that I said that.
A lot of pressure, Nancy.
I know. So
there's like Zoom anxiety that I have never experienced this weird anxiety before, until every time before a Zoom meeting, I'm like, I am just going to break the internet. It's fine.
Can people see that? Hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So here you see the St. Rita. I mean, it is a beautiful Roman church. It's like you're in Italy when you see St. Rita of Cascia Church. It's just amazing. So here's the new building to the right. So the Cascia Center is here down at the ground floor. I wish I had pulled up a plan, but this angles in here, so that as you're coming down Broad Street, the idea is that you're sort of drawn into this little plaza here, the little piazza that we created between the church and the building. As I mentioned, the building is clad in red brick, which is the neighborhood, but also in this is called Aristcraft, but it's a stone-like material. It's laid up just like the brick is. So the masons built this whole building. And so this is obviously in reference to the limestone of the church facade. And as you, here we are on Broad Street looking across at the building, the red brick and then the stone here you are down at street level. This is our subway stop, which is an awesome addition to be able to be right adjacent to this beautiful entrance to the subway. Here is looking into the plaza. The trees, I think now are starting to have leaves on them. Is that right? I know the magnolia was blooming back in here. There's a lot going on in this little plaza. So the residents will walk through here to get to the entrance in the back, and then folks will come into the Cascia Center right here where my mouse is moving. Here you get a better view of that plaza. Let me just see. I think that's mostly, yeah, that's what I had pulled up. So,
and it's a little hard to see, but we designed it so that where Nancy's mouse was kind of hovering is where the residents enter, so that they weren't entering the building in the hustle and the bustle of Broad Street. So that it was a more purposeful, traveling back to their entrance, and felt a little more private for them towards the the back section of the building. And they have there's a little gate there. I don't know if you can see a little fenced in area that begins the part that's the residential part of the building.
They have a couple benches back there, and it's very lushly landscaped. As that comes in, I think it'll feel quite lush.
Is it an area that's lit at night?
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, oh.
No, it really is. And I'm hopeful that this always feels safe for them to traverse back there. But this was part of the challenge of having a mixed use building on a very tight site, and really wanting them to come into the building off of Broad Street and not down Ellsworth. But this is very well lit plaza here. And so at night it's very well lit.
And we often get questions about, why are you being, I don't want to use the word simple, but it is fairly simple concrete through that plaza, not fancy, stones and things. We are, again, just so conscious of the fact that the building is for seniors, and every bit of design is keeping in mind, making sure that it's a level surface, that it's going to be conducive to folks with mobility issues.
Yeah.
So
pushing a walker in a wheelchair. Yes.
Yeah.
I think the facade, John has said in the chat, that is a wonderful balance of new related to old. It respects both the grand church as well as brick row houses in South Philly. But to add on to that, I feel like it's a really nice balance with the free library that's down the street too. Like there's something about the profile that just feels really nice when you go by. And like I just wanted to say that like as someone who goes past this pretty often, because I go to Sprouts a lot, like and I have a ton of photos of the outside of St. Rita's because it's beautiful. Like I am obsessed with the statues that have the netting in front of it right now, that I'm always like, every time I go by, I'm like, ooh, shot. I honestly like barely even noticed that construction was happening, which I feel like is such a rarity in Philly, like, because typically you can't even go down the sidewalk when there is any development happening. So the fact that like there was this giant project happening and people could still exist in the same space as it, I think is like, as we're talking about positive development, like that is a positive, I think.
Well, and it was this site was particularly challenging because it was so tight. There are some construction sites that we have plenty of space. We can have a big construction trailer, so our contractor had to be really thoughtful about every single, piece of equipment they were bringing onto site. How were they going to block a street? When were they going to block it if they needed to? I think just a few weeks ago, we had to get the emergency generator put onto the roof of the building. So that was a huge crane that we had to bring in. Again, it takes, with this site, just a lot of careful planning for all of those things.
Yeah, and it points out, that, these urban sites have real challenges to them, but then great benefits, in the end. Definitely worth it,
I'm thinking about, Nancy was talking about how, the subway is such a benefit to the site because it's right there. When we were going through the design process, the subway was right there.
Yes.
So when we're talking, structurally, in terms of the work, the structural engineers, we had to take a lot of time to really think through okay, how are we going to build this? We can't damage the subway. And, you know, it was quite challenging.
And review with SEPTA and get them on board. Yeah, there's a lot going on here. There's a stormwater management going on here that you don't see, but all the water that's falling on this site, both on the building and on the plaza, is being captured, brought underground into a tank underground. There's a rain garden here along the Cascia St. Rita's Church. So there's a lot going on here. Very complicated. Lots and lots of layers of complexity.
You all did a wonderful job. It is just like echoing John, I think is such a well-designed building and fits so well into the environment that's already there.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Wanda asks, how many units and what amenities, and are there security cameras?
So it's 46 units. There are security cameras. There's also a key fob system for the residents. So, you know, it's not just like a door that anybody can walk through. You have to be able to swipe to get in. In terms of amenities, on the second floor, right above the Cascia Center, is a lovely community room with beautiful big windows. And in there is a kitchen. I mean, every apartment has its own kitchen, but this has a community kitchen in the community room so that residents can use this for either building gatherings, or if they want to use the space to have a family party, they can do that. They can throw a bridal shower for their, you know, granddaughter in that community room. We also have 2 laundry rooms in the building. And I'm sure there's more, Nancy. I'm just drawing a blank.
You have a pantry?
Oh my goodness, we have an on-site food pantry. We do this in all of our senior buildings. We actually find that a lot of our seniors have a lot of food insecurity. So we provide a space in the building where we have food for distribution. It includes, you know, food that is non-perishable, you know, like canned food, pastas, things like that. But then we also have a freezer so that we can have meats and vegetables and things that, and residents go crazy when we have, you know, turkey or salmon. Salmon went over like,
oh,
it was so popular. Anyway, so we do that monthly and we distribute to residents in need throughout the building. And again, I think it's something that a lot of folks don't realize seniors would need. They just don't realize that monthly check that they get for their pension goes pretty quickly.
And the food pantry is, I'm sure the need's been there a long time, but we're seeing it more and more in all the senior projects and even family projects. The food insecurity, the project I mentioned in North Philadelphia will have a 5,000 square foot distribution center for just giving out food. That this will become the neighborhood hub where churches and different organizations who are able to get food to be able to give out will be able to store it here. It's just such a huge need. It just feels wrong, like that's what we have to, like that's what we have to do. Like people should have enough money to buy food that they need.
Yeah, for a lot of seniors, they're making decisions about, do they pay for their medications or do they go to the grocery store and you know, get food for themselves? And oftentimes they choose the food over the medications. We want to make sure that they know that they should be choosing, get your medication. We'll make sure that you can have the food that you need.
Yeah.
And then Wanda has a follow-up question of, do you plan group activities for your tenants, or is that?
It's a little bit of a mix between the building planning for themselves and us planning for them. And I will say COVID made all of those things a little difficult over the past couple of years. Now St. Rita's is relatively new, so we're really just getting programming started. But in our other buildings, we will run, monthly birthday parties for all of the residents. And obviously around all of the holidays, we have, building activities. And some of our buildings, the residents have daily bingo or weekly bingo, depending on what they want, movie nights. We really tailor it to the community and what they want to have. So we're never going to tell everybody it's time to come to bingo. You need to be here. If a community doesn't like that, then tell us what they do like and we'll make it happen for them. So.
Awesome. So we're almost at time.
Stop sharing.
So I wanted to ask all of you, well, I guess before that, I really loved the Cascia Center's guiding question of how can we be a unique force for reconciliation and healing in our city? And I feel like that is a question we should all ask ourselves all the time, right? And one of the reasons that I was really drawn to talking to all of you, because I just think that is such like an obvious question, but it's also like, I think especially with developers is not a question that they ask themselves very often. Speaking of loving going to zoning meetings, I was recently at a community zoning meeting where a developer, I again have feelings. A developer, when asked why he was building like a high rise on a community space, was like, well, it's my property, so I don't, why should I have to provide something for the community here because I bought it? Which I feel like is like the complete opposite of the Cascia Center's guiding question of being a unique force for reconciliation and healing in our city. So I'm wondering if, can this be a guiding question, or like, do you feel like this is a guiding question for yourselves, like in the work that you do and like moving forward to continue, like obviously Nancy and Heather, like with development and with the projects you're working on. And then Father Jeremy is your guiding question. So I'm sure you are doing it at the Cascia Center. But I guess like, what does it mean to you going forward and doing the work that you do within communities? And maybe we end on that, because I just love it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think as a developer, what needs to guide us at Catholic Housing and Community Services is how are we helping not just individuals, but the community? And we continue to look at that as our guide. And a lot of people, Nancy had alluded to this, a lot of people don't necessarily think about housing as a way to bring people together and to heal them. But when you take care of their physical needs, you start that healing process.
Yeah, and that's beautifully said. And I liked what Father Jeremy said at the beginning of that, when one of us suffers, we all suffer. Mm-hmm. I mean, that just got me right there. And I think that, I feel so lucky that every day I get to get up and work on this type of work. I didn't become an architect to design affordable housing, but I don't want to do anything except design affordable housing. It's really what, I just can't imagine. I just feel very, very lucky to be able to contribute to that in that way. So we also do market rate housing, and we do very, very high end housing. And I like to enlighten them whenever I can to the needs of the bigger community. And it's always and I think that the doing both that they can talk to each other that way is good too. So but I feel very, very lucky. And this project was just an amazing opportunity. And but this, when any of us suffer, we all suffer, I think is just so true. So I love that.
Yeah, and I would just add, taking care of our human brothers and sisters is the gospel. That's the gospel summarized, and love God and neighbor. And so, from the Cascia Center perspective specifically, anytime we can bring people together that otherwise wouldn't come together, anytime we have an opportunity to be a good neighbor and help our neighbors be good neighbors, I think we're living that gospel message, as that's exactly what St. Rita did in her time. She simply brought people together who otherwise would not have been brought together. And so I think there's real opportunity at the Cascia Center for that, especially its location, which is so accessible to so many people that just need to come together. And so I look forward to seeing where those opportunities will emerge over time. We're very excited at the shrine, and is because it's another way to share the mission that we've been there for the past 115 years to do.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah.
Like we were saying before everyone got in, this is a really nice start to my Friday.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for thinking so highly of the work that we do and wanting us to talk about it. We love sharing this incredible work.
Yeah, I personally can't wait to see all of the work that you three and everyone else involved with you continue to do, because I just think it's incredible. And I'm pretty sure everyone in the chat also thinks so. Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm definitely now going to be one of the pilgrims to Cascia.
Yeah.
I look forward to it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks so much.
everyone. I hope you have a great Friday.
You too.